It is 6:30 on the dot. Welcome to Seattle City Club. I am so excited for tonight. Thank you everyone for being here and bringing your energy and your curiosity. This topic is huge for all of us and for all of our loved ones. So excited to get into it. Before we do, we have a special drawing and a video before that drawing. So we're going to kick things off with a little bit of excitement here.
I'm Natalie. I'm the owner of Body Strong in Burien. As a small business owner, you really wear a lot of hats, and it's a joy, but sometimes it can be stressful. But something like the Comcast Rise grant really helped us because it gave us free iPads, we got 2 laptops, we had a desktop computer, we got free internet for a year. Small businesses should apply for the Comcast Rise grant because, to be honest, the application process is very simple. Grow your business and apply today.
Cool, thank you so much. All right, for tonight's drawing, I don't know if anyone has heard, but there's a very special show coming to the Fifth Avenue Theater as a women-founded organization. This is a pretty cool one to be celebrating, so can I introduce Ariel with the Fifth Avenue Theater?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having us today. My name is Ariel Gomez-Bradler. I am the managing director of the Fifth Avenue Theater. We're so proud to be here. Move this direction is what I'm being told, but also don't trip over this. So, okay, great. The Fifth Avenue Theater is excited to partner with City Club on the upcoming production of SUFS. SUFS is about the decade leading up to 1919 when the door was finally opened for women to vote in the United States. It features historic characters and tells the riveting story of the fight for suffrage and equality before and after the 19th Amendment, where decades of work was still to be done for all citizens to vote regardless of gender or race. City Club, an organization founded by women in the Seattle area who cared about civic engagement and advocacy, is proud to be a partner of SUFS. So thank you all for being here tonight. We are going to do a drawing for 2 tickets for one of the performances on September 21st. If you don't win, we do have a special code just for you all tonight. That code is City Club, easy to remember. If you type in City Club in our promotions, you'll receive 20% off for all of our shows. But we're really excited to partner with City Club, and just thank you again for the time this evening. Bobby, do you want to draw the special ticket?
I do.
Yes. Oh, yes. Did anybody not get a chance to enter? You have one more chance. Right here. All right. Anybody else? Last chance, last chance. Okay, here we go. That would be great. Thank you so much. Okay. If you've got your tickets out, we are looking for ticket number 676-4488. Heard a gasp. Yay! Okay. If you will meet us at intermission, we'll get all your details and tell you how to pick up those tickets. Congratulations. Thank you all again. I'll pass it back to Bobby.
Thank you so much, Ariel. Can we get a clap for the Fifth Avenue Theater and SUFS and women voting? Really quickly before we get on to the main event here, I want to make a mention. If you are wanting more drawings in your immediate future, there will be some more drawings in your immediate future at intermission, which is when we take a quick break to get drinks, snacks, go to the bathroom. We will be having an additional drawing for 3 day passes to the collective. If you're not aware, this space is super awesome. It's full of creative, innovative people doing work all day long here in the Seattle area. It is an amazing place to get some work done, have some good bites, network, and so we'll be giving away 3 day passes to our lovely hosts here at the collective at intermission. Without further ado, Lisa Stifler with GeekWire.
I've never this time. I got my own. Thanks. All right. Welcome, everyone. This is a great panel tonight. I'm just so thrilled to be with the 3 of you. These people live and breathe these issues. They're so passionate and have been doing it, I think, for their entire career. So it's really lucky to have the chance to hear their thoughts on some really important issues. the way we're doing this tonight, I don't know if anyone's seen the schedule, but we'll have 30 minutes of discussion about an initial topic, which is energy innovation. And then we'll have a 10-minute break, and then another 30 minutes looking at climate adaptation and resiliency. So to kick things off, I'd like everyone here to introduce yourselves and your organization. We'll start with you, Greg.
Hi, everybody. Good to see you all. I see some I haven't seen you in a long time. And I met some new people. I'm Greg Small. I'm the Executive Director of Climate Solutions. We're a nonprofit organization. We're based here in Seattle. We've been around for about 30 years. We work in Washington and Oregon, so in the great Pacific Northwest. Our sort of bread and butter is working on public policy. For folks who don't know, you should all be super proud that the Northwest has some of the best policies on climate in the whole country. Washington in particular, we've got great policies on 100% clean energy, on transportation, on we have a Cabinet Invest program that's invested about $1 billion a year into solutions. We have an incredible, on buildings, just a great policy infrastructure, and Climate Solutions and a lot of other organizations played a big role in helping that happen. And we continue to do a lot of work in that space. But we're also really focused on something I think we'll talk tonight, which is actually deployment and actually having things happen on the ground to make a difference, whether that be heat pumps or more electric vehicles or getting solar panels and wind. And again, we'll talk more about that when we get into it more.
Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Moore, and I'm the Director of Climate and Energy at Sightline Institute. Sightline is also a nonprofit organization, I think founded around the same time as Climate Solutions. We're a think tank, so we conduct independent, nonpartisan research, policy analysis, as well as engage in advocacy work in the broader Northwest. Our work is mostly focused on Washington and Oregon, but we do work in Montana, Idaho, British Columbia, and Alaska as well. Excited for the conversation. Thank you all for taking time out of your evenings to be here.
Great. Excuse me. Thank you. It's really a delight to see so many friends and colleagues and meet new people. I'm Dan Schwartz. I'm director of the University of Washington's Clean Energy Institute. Our mission is to accelerate the adoption of a scalable and equitable clean energy future. And that word adoption is a very scary word for a university, but we have a theory for change, which has really been to create facilities that everybody can use. So they're open access for industry to come in. So 160 companies have used University of Washington facilities, as well as our researchers and others, to try and accelerate innovation in clean energy. And we have the secret weapon of amazing young people. And they are a part of our mission is to put them in a position to be in your K through 12 school, in the Washington State Academy of Sciences supporting policy analysis, or in E8 doing work with climate investors. And so they are part of the ecosystem that we try to really support. So thank you for coming.
Great. So as I mentioned, what we're going to start with is really the energy innovation space. And to help orient, I'm going to ask Emily to sort of set the stage for what's happening in Washington State in terms of where do we get our power? Where are we moving with our power? What are the big demands on the energy system here? And how are we working to meet those? You ready?
I think so.
Okay.
So I thought it'd be useful to level set a little bit so we understand where our climate pollution comes from in Washington, what our contribution is to our warming world, the increasing heat waves we're seeing every summer, the drier springs, the cold snaps even. So in terms of our climate emissions, the pollution that the state is emitting, we produce about 96 million metric tons. Bear with me, I'm going to spew some stats. 96 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent every year. That's about the same as we emitted in 1990, so 35 years ago. And there's good news and bad news there. I mean, it's obviously bad news that we're still polluting at that level. But our population has also almost doubled in that time period, so our per capita emissions have dropped significantly. And that level is lower than our peak emissions in 2000. So we are headed in the right direction. I should also say that that stat comes from 2021. So we're a little delayed on our state data. And so Greg mentioned a couple of our nation-leading climate policies. Many of you may have voted this past November to keep our Climate Commitment Act, our nation-leading Cap and Invest program. That was enacted after that statistic was released. So we haven't yet seen the emission, we don't yet know the emissions impact of the Climate Commitment Act, but we anticipate that it will help drive reduction in that. In terms of the sectors contributing to the pollution, the biggest one in both Washington State and here in the city of Seattle is transportation. So 40% of Washington's emissions come from transportation. That's followed by buildings. So when we think about emissions from buildings, that's mostly burning natural gas for heat, at least in the residential sector. So I have a gas furnace. I'd rather not, but I'm a renter, so I don't have a lot of choice with that. And then followed by electricity. So about 20% of Washington State's emissions come from the electricity sector, so generating power. Now, I want to focus a little bit on the electric sector because it is the kind of key to the entire energy transition. The reason is that we need to switch everything that runs on fossil fuels, whether it's our cars, our home heating systems, how we cook our food, onto electricity. And then we need to clean up that electricity and make sure it is not emitting carbon. So it has kind of, the electric sector, even though it's only 20% of our emissions, has an outsized role in the transformation that we need to see to meet our climate targets. So we have some good news there too. Washington is ahead of the pack in terms of our clean electricity. We rank number 1 in the United States in terms of carbon-free electricity. Does anyone know what number 2 is? That's a good guess. It's a good guess. It's actually South Dakota. So South Dakota gets about 60% of its electricity from wind. Texas ranks number 1 in terms of new renewable generation. Really puts us to...
They had some catching up to do, though.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, maybe in other places. But yeah, so we have about 60% of our electricity comes from hydroelectric dams in Washington State, about 18% from burning natural gas, about 10% from other renewable resources, wind and solar, mostly wind. We have very little solar here in Washington. We have 1 nuclear plant for generating power, and then coal is thankfully on its way out. We will be coal-free by the end of this year. The last coal-fired power plant will be shuttering in Centralia this year, and yeah, thanks to the great work of many people here, I'm sure. So just to end a little bit with the challenges, or preview, I guess, some of the challenges that we're facing right now. One is that we're in a drought. We've been in a 3-year drought, and that is cutting our hydroelectric capacity significantly. Washington State, in, I believe, 2024 produced a third less from its dams than in 2011, which was the peak. The Grand Coulee Dam, which is in eastern Washington, and if you haven't been, I highly recommend a field trip out there. It's very interesting. It's the biggest power plant in the United States and one of the biggest concrete structures in the world. I went out there a couple of years ago. It is our biggest power producer here in Washington, and it produced half of its peak demand, or peak generation last year. So we're facing a major drought, which means that we need to fill up that capacity with renewable resources, making that kind of even a more difficult challenge. Second challenge, which we're going to talk a lot about, I think, tonight, is the rising demand for electricity coming from not just data centers, but other sectors. I do want to note that there's a lot of the demand, or discussion around demand of electricity, which is also known as load growth, is projections. Like we aren't actually seeing in Washington State yet a rise in electricity consumption. We're actually using less electricity than we were a decade ago, but all indications are that that's going to change over time. We just don't know by how much. So that's a new challenge for us to face. And then lastly, I talked about Texas, but we are very slow at building new renewable resources here in Washington. So over the last decade, if you rank all 50 states in terms of how much new renewable energy was built in that state, Washington's number 42, Texas is number 1. So we have a lot of work to do to make it a lot easier and quicker to build new renewable generation, as well as grid capacity to get that generation to where it's needed so that we can actually meet some of these targets. I'll leave it at that.
Oh, that's wonderful. It's amazing you have all those numbers in your head. So I want to start looking at some of these solutions. You've teed up that we've been very reliant on hydropower. There's less water, there's more demand, and so we need to be looking at new alternatives for addressing the energy needs. Dan is sitting in the epicenter of that and his role. Can you talk a little bit about some of the promising technologies, whether that's new ways of doing photovoltaics or fusion? Take us on a journey of what's out on the horizon.
Well, thanks for the question. There's an explosion, no pun intended, of new energy technologies. I mean, look at the electric vehicles out on the road and the growth of that. That is part of the projection of new electricity. As we move away from fossil energy, we go to electrification. But a common question is, what are those minerals? What's inside of that battery? And really a frontier area is squeezing all of the conflict minerals out. Today, we use about 10% as much cobalt, which is one of those materials that is sourced from poor places around the globe. We use about 10% as much in a battery as we did a decade or two ago. We're working now, sort of the frontier areas of battery research are batteries with really earth-abundant materials. Iron, sodium, sulfur, these are things that are everywhere, so there's not supply chain problems and whatnot. So batteries are advancing really, I think, rapidly, both in the conventional lithium-ion batteries that we have today that are driving systems, but also new chemistries that are less taxing on the earth, more able to be, the resources to be recovered. In solar, it's really interesting. I mean, solar is really the cheapest, fastest thing that you can install today for new generating capacity. And it's, when it's coupled with a battery, it is really a tremendous new resource for the grid to be able to shift power production and power use at different times. So there's a ton of new software and hardware innovations that are taking place in how do we manage electricity. Today, when you switch on a light, somewhere a generator spins a little faster. But when you have solar and storage at your house or storage on the grid, you can decouple what generation is doing from the time that you want to use it. So you have this ability to store energy. That is transformational. It lets us use the same grid we have today and get a lot more energy products on that grid because we don't have to depend on the randomness of everybody turning everything on at the same time of the day. All the air conditioners or heating going on at the exact same. 6 a.m. your heater turns on, we're using energy all collectively together. If we have a battery, that can be provided locally for some people and we can spread the load out. We can do a lot more to address the energy challenges, I think, through smart integration of energy technologies. That's something our scholars, our students are working on, the software and the tools for that. Finally, in solar, solar is really cheap, as I said. So why do we need innovation in solar? An expensive part about solar is the lawyers to get the permits, all this stuff that goes into it. And so when somebody grabs a solar panel and mounts it, you want to get 20% more energy out of it because you've got all these sunk costs. And so we're working on new ways to generate solar with much higher efficiency than the current cells, the solar cells and modules that we buy today. and that can be integrated into those. New coatings that can turn parts of the sun that are not used by the current solar panels. It can upshift or downshift the wavelength of the light so that it's usable by that solar panel underneath. And so there's all kinds of innovation, large parts of it driven by materials, both in batteries and in solar, by manufacturing. We want the productivity of American workers to be able to produce solar panels at the price points that we need and to scale that manufacturing. And then finally, through the system integration, all the software, hardware, technologies that we now carry even in our pocket enables amazing new sort of energy integration strategies.
All right, I want to stay with you for just one more minute. You know, at GeekWire, I cover climate technology a lot, and there's so many sexy ones out there with fusion, with small modular reactors, geothermal, but you're talking about like very traditional solutions. Is that really enough to do what we need? Is it going to take all of the above, or should we really be focusing on the technologies you're talking about that are proven?
Well, so all of the above is almost always the right answer in terms of non-fossil resources. But, you know, there's a couple of timescales that we have to think about. I mean, right now, there is a push for the economic growth that AI and data centers, you know, that is probably not going to be served by a fusion reactor in the next 10 years. But we as a society are dealing with this challenge of we want the economic opportunities that energy enables. And so clean energy, the resources I talked about, are ones that in 10 years we can do. By the way, today we can do a lot more than we're doing. To Emily, and I think we'll hear from Greg, with all of the current technologies. But the things I'm talking about in the next 10 years can be radical transformers as we're doing all of the things we need to do to get the reliability and the cleanness that can support individuals at a price point that they can do. So I love fusion. I love that we are fusion capital of the world in this region. But there's no utility that has on their 10-year planning document for resources a fusion reactor, or even a small modular reactor, or even a conventional nuclear reactor. You're just not going to build those in 10 years. So that is something that we need to think about. What are we doing in this 10 years, and what are we doing in the next 10 years?
All right. I know, you've been so patient. All right, let's go, Greg, let's go. So so it seems like the logical thing is to talk a little bit about the public policy, the political will to do some of these installations that we're talking about that are feasible today, they're needed today. So why are it 40 seconds? What, can you address some of that?
Painful. I will. I just wanted to add a little bit more context to what was said. We are in this unbelievably unique moment in time right now. And specifically, Emily, you talked about, electricity, while it's only 20%, which is a lot, but it's only percent of our emissions, it is the backbone of the entire transition, okay? What's happening in energy right now is really kind of unprecedented, right? So in the last 30 years in the United States, now I'm moving out of Washington State context and nationally, we basically have had no load growth fundamentally, right? It's mainly because of efficiency, as was talked before, like we have more population, but because of efficiency, we've basically been flat for 30 years. We know that demand is going up, and the projections, while they're difficult to know for sure because of data centers, because of AI, because of the electrification we talked about of cars, of buildings, because we're bringing more industry into the United States that requires energy, like demand is gonna go up. And I've seen projections like all over the place. Like they're gonna go crazy or it's gonna be modest, but it's gonna be meaningful. Okay, so that's gonna require us to have more energy or to get even radically more efficient. That's the demand side. We're expecting an increase. The supply side is getting harder and harder. So some of it is, what Emily talked about, just like, it's just hard to build, especially in places like Washington. It's just like hard to build new wind projects. It's hard to build new solar projects. part of that, to put it in the political context that we're working in, is that the Trump administration is waging a radical war on renewables that make no sense. Forget climate change for a second. This is an incredible stat. In 2024, which is the most recent, we're only halfway through 25 or so, all the new energy that went onto the grid, 93% of it was solar, wind, and batteries. So that basically means like all the new generation, basically solar and wind batteries. Okay. And the Trump administration and Republican Congress are making it extraordinarily difficult to build that. So do the math in your head. We're going to see a spike in demand. What was responsible in the most recent year for the overwhelming majority of new generation was solar, wind, and batteries, and we're going to make that more difficult. Nuclear's 5 to 10 years away, maybe. Gas, even if you wanted to build a new gas plant, there's a very significant supply chain challenge. So you can't be like, well, we're going to build a new gas plant in Washington. I mean, that's not going to probably happen. But anywhere in the United States, if you wanted to build a gas plant, it's just hard to do because you can't, you're 3, 4, 7 years away from being able to get a gas turbine. So we're spiking demand. We're making it more difficult to put on, as Dan said, like that's the fastest way to get new generation is solar and wind. That's not good math, right? Supply and demand is not in a good trajectory right now. And the concern, if we don't get that right, is every single one of us sitting in this room, we're going to pay more for our energy. Again, supply and demand, it's math, right? If supply is constrained and demand goes up, that means increased costs. So, and also reliability can be a concern. So this is the moment that we're in right now, which is really different than anything we've been in the past 30 years. So I wanted to just put that context in there as we start to talk into.
Yeah.
You want me to talk a little bit about the policy and the politics
well,
and public
that's.
support?
I mean, right. So the federal landscape is a hot mess, but do we have enough autonomy and money to kind of like, F off, we're going to do this instead? Can we do that?
Yes and no. I mean, look, macroeconomic trends matter. I mean, they just do. Like, you cannot completely isolate yourself from the reality of policy that's as aggressive as it is right now and these changing economics and these changing, you can't do it completely. There is a lot, though, that we can do, right? So, I mean, again, Emily talked a bit about how difficult it is to site solar and wind projects in Washington. Like, we have the ability to control that. So we need to demand that we build those faster. We have the ability to have some control over increasing transmission lines so that when we do build more solar, when we do build more wind, the electrons can move to the place that they are, to the place you can go. So we do have the ability to do a lot. We can't do everything, but we can do an awful lot. And it is incumbent upon all of us to sort of demand and make some of those changes for sure. I know later maybe we'll get into some individual choices, but from a political perspective, we need to fight what the Trump administration and Republicans are doing to, I mean, it is an aggressive term, but they are waging a war on solar and wind. I mean, just to give you an example, there was a project on the East Coast, a wind project, offshore wind project. $5 billion was already spent on it, 80% complete. All the permits in the can, and the Trump administration, with no rationale, said we're going to stop this project. This was going to power 300,000 homes, a lot of jobs. Again, $5 billion already spent, 80% done. It's insanity. We have to fight against that. That's tough to win. We don't have the levers of power at the federal level. We still have to fight it. But in Washington State, we do have much more power to make a difference again on these solar projects, on these wind projects, and so on and so forth. And that's us.
We have just a few more minutes before a break. I don't know how that went so fast, but it's almost 7. So I want to go back to Emily for a minute and talk a little bit about about the data centers. I mean, you talked about the wide range of different demands for power, but can you speak to that? That's kind of the boogeyman right now, is fears about what's happening with data centers. And again, it's another place where the Trump administration is pushing AI really hard, which in many ways makes sense, but then that could be a rationale for like, we're gonna forget all about, we're gonna fire up the coal plants and the natural gas.
Yeah, definitely the topic du jour. So in Washington State, we've had data centers in Washington or in the Northwest for decades. It's not actually a new thing, but what is new is the AI.
Do you want to say what a data center is?
Just basically a building, a box. No, I don't want to say what a data center is. I can say about the energy it uses. Maybe Dan can tell us about the inside of a data center.
It's filled with racks and racks and racks and racks. Football fields worth of racks of computers is a hyperscale data center. And all the cooling to cool those racks and racks and racks, and a substation sitting next to it.
Thanks. It is a weird mystery
Phone a
thing.
friend.
Like, what is the data center? All right, go ahead.
Yeah, so we've had data centers for a while, but they're basically AI requires so much more energy than the data centers that are powering Netflix or whatever, Zoom, everything else that we're using. They still make up a pretty small portion of Washington State's electricity use today. Maybe my kind of repetitive point that I'm making is don't believe all of the hype around everything around data centers or electricity load growth. So today, data centers use about 6% of Washington State's electricity, 4% of US overall. So it's not negligible, but it's not massive. The projections are, as Greg kind of alluded to, all over the map, and really nobody knows how much electricity demand data centers are going to use. The fundamental uncertainty comes from both, we don't know how much consumer demand there actually will be for this technology, that is a big unknown, and we don't know how much the data centers will innovate or evolve in terms of how much electricity each one is using. There could be efficiency gains that we can't anticipate right now. All that being said, there's only one report that everybody cites that has the projections at a state level for how much demand for electricity data centers might need by 2030. And so the range for Washington State is between 7% and 14%. 14% is a pretty high portion of our electricity demand. I will say there are hotspots in Washington where we have seen significant spikes in electricity demand, mostly from Microsoft, their AI data centers. So Grant County and Douglas County are the two that have seen over 50% increases in their need to provide electricity over the last 5 years or so. Maybe longer than 5 years, but in the recent years. And the irony actually of those two cases is that Microsoft and whoever the other customers are has their own corporate carbon-free targets. And so the two utilities that are serving Microsoft and its data centers basically shuffled around their power and are now giving the carbon-free hydropower to Microsoft so that Microsoft can meet its carbon-free target, and the utilities are buying electricity on the open market that is dirtier than Washington State's average. A lot of it is natural gas. The good news is they can't actually do that for very long because of the Clean Energy Transformation Act, so they're going to have to figure something else out. That's kind of a temporary solution, and it's also not something that most utilities can do. They can only do it if they own their own dams. Most of the dams in Washington and the Northwest are federally owned. So most utilities can't do those deals that you may have read about. But still, that is a concerning trend. There are a few different things that we can do that I don't think are talked about enough. Certainly the dominant industry perspective is let's build more gas plants, which is very difficult, if not impossible, to do in Washington or Oregon. There's definitely going to be no new coal in Washington or Oregon. But that is kind of the dominant conversation is, well, we've got to build more gas generating plants in order to meet this new demand. There are other things that we can do. So one, I'll list three. One is that we can do what's known as demand response. So it's basically flexing when a data center or where a data center powers on when the grid is really stressed. People may have heard a couple years ago, everyone in California, I think, got a text message that the grid was really overheated and, you know, please turn off whatever electricity you're using, and that prevented rolling blackouts. Same kind of concept where if the grid is overstressed, the data center could ramp down how much electricity it's using or move it to another place. The reason that's really important is because we actually build our electricity system to meet the peak demand, which only happens a couple of hours, a couple of days a year. So most of the time, we actually have some excess capacity in the grid. So if we can avoid building a system to a new peak because of data center demand, because there's flexibility, that can help us get out of some of this challenging situation. Most of the data center operators will say, no, we can't do that. Our work is too important, we can't ramp it down. But Google did just announce, I think last week or a couple weeks ago, that they have a new demand response program that they've agreed to with a couple of utilities in the Midwest and the South. So it is possible, actually. And Texas, not to keep talking about Texas, but they just passed a law to create a mandatory demand response program for data centers in the state. We don't have anything like that in the Northwest, and we could. Another concern, Greg talked about energy affordability. We have right now in Washington state some of the cheapest electricity in the country. It's number 10, cheapest. That could change if some of those dynamics that Greg was talking about pan out. One way that we could think about this is basically we don't want everybody else to subsidize data centers and the grid upgrades that they need. In Oregon, I think Climate Solutions was really involved in this bill. The Oregon legislature passed a bill called the Power Act this year that basically tries to segment out data center users and to protect everybody else from their investments, especially if those needs for new infrastructure, if the data centers don't pan out. If that demand evaporates, we don't want everybody else holding the bag for those grid investments. So we could look at something similar in Washington state. And then we could also look at new opportunities to charge data centers higher electricity rates for more innovative clean energy solutions that a utility might not be able to invest in, because utilities are required to invest in the least cost resources by law and regulation. There's an example, I think it's again Google and Nevada. They designed this, what's known as a green tariff, not to be confused with the other tariffs that are in the news. It's basically a utility rate. And essentially it allows the utility and Google to invest in advanced geothermal. So some of the ideas that Dan is talking about, again, a utility can't really invest in those because it would be imprudent for them to do so. There might be opportunities to leverage some of the deep pockets of the tech companies to invest in some of these farther afield innovations that could ideally ultimately benefit all of us. So those are some ideas I think that we're not talking about enough in terms of data centers.
All right, I think we're to the point of needing to take a break. So 5 minutes, 10 minutes? 10 minutes. Okay.
Testing. I'll pop on real quick here. If anyone feels smarter after that conversation, can we give our panel a round of applause real quick here? Thank you, guys. That is just the beginning. We are going to take a quick 10-minute break. Let's be back in our seats at 7:20. We will draw those day passes for the collective as soon as y'all are back. We will also be doing our question and answer session. So if you have any questions after all of that, get them burning and ready to go. And we will also announce the dates of the Seattle City Club debates coming up if your political curiosity is piqued after all of this. See you at 7:20. Welcome back to Seattle City Club. I was so excited about this panel, I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Bobby Nickel. I am a brand new baby board member here at Seattle City Club and pumped about it. I've been coming to Civic Cocktails since about 2013, nerding out, happily meeting everybody here, and grateful to everyone who's in this room participating, including several other board members and Civic Club staffers and supporters. Can you wave your hand if you're part of the City Club support crew, basically, let's say? We got a few folks in the room. So thank you for being here and for your support of this program. Ever important in today's day and age as we have several things to discuss that matter to all of us. We promised you another drawing. We've got it. These are for day passes at the collective. If I call your name, which have been randomly highlighted based on tonight's attendance sheet, will you please stand and we will make sure that we notify that you are available to receive your drawing pass. All right, so for 3 day passes to the collective, first we have David Mooring. Is David Mooring here? Hey, congratulations, David. Alrighty, woo-woo. Second, Jeffrey Cooper Smith. Jeffrey Cooper Smith. Cool last name, not present. Too bad for Jeffrey. Keegan Prosser. Is Keegan Prosser here? Hey, congratulations, Keegan, with the cool neck handkerchief. And lastly, Sabine Blumenthal. Is Sabine here? Yeah, congratulations, Sabine. Enjoy working at the collective. It really is a fun place to sit and see who you spot throughout the day. All right, a quick little announcement before we get back to our main program. Sorry, I'm juggling a couple different things here. Thank you. Our next Civic Cocktail is not going to be until November. The reason for this is that we are having some very exciting events October 2nd and 3rd. If you are unaware, there is a major local election happening, and some of the City Club team has been working hard behind the scenes to secure debates, which we have successfully hosted in the past. This year, we are hosting debates for 2 of the most neck-and-neck hot races that really make a difference for where we live. So the Seattle mayoral debate will be happening, courtesy of City Club, as well as King County Executive. If you've been following these races, these are the races to watch. If you are going to be watching the results on election night, they are going to be like a big result whenever the numbers come in. So definitely a place to be. We'll be putting out more information about that in the coming days, right, Jillian? We're like right about there, so keep your eyes open for those details. We're very pumped about it. On to Lisa and the rest of this program. Can we get a big round of applause?
Over the break, our panel decided to go rogue, and so for the second half, we're gonna, I'm looking at City Club people, it'll be good. So the initial intention was to talk a little more about resiliency and adaptation right now, but I think we might leave that for the Q&A if people are curious to dig deeper into that. Instead, we're gonna go speed round. And so the question I wanna ask each of the panelists first is, what clean energy technology would you deploy tomorrow if you could at scale to help Washington State? Sorry, I didn't warn you I was going to ask you that either. Dan.
Sure. So the thing that makes the whole grid work better is more energy storage on the grid, so that you can you can separate the demand for energy from the use of energy. The generation and the demand. Sorry, said the same thing for twice. No, use and generation. If you have a battery, you can separate those and smooth things out. The capacity that I don't remember whether it was Greg or Emily mentioned, that we, in most hours, 8,560 hours of the year, we have plenty of capacity. It's like 10 hours out of the year where we run out of capacity and we're at a risk of a brownout or a blackout. It doesn't take a lot of batteries to knock those things down and smooth it out and give us a lot more capacity to grow our economy and whatnot. So if I could implement it tomorrow, it would be batteries.
All right, Emily, what do you got?
Building on the grid theme, I don't know if folks are familiar with advanced conductors. So conductors are basically just the wire in a transmission line, a power line. And they have been around for about 100 years. But there's some new wires that if you just swap them out, you can get potentially double the capacity out of an existing line. And it also hardens it against wildfires. It's so much easier and faster to do that than building brand new transmission lines, which we do need to do. But we can also upgrade our existing grid much more quickly by implementing these advanced conductors.
All right.
I was going to say batteries, but I like that one too. We worked on a bunch of policies around that. But I'm going to stick to batteries, even though I love the grid enhancing technologies.
Okay, cool. So we've got ideas for what could be done. So if you could wave another wand, what is the hurdle you would eliminate to help facilitate some of this deployment? Whether it's a law, it's a lawmaker, it's money. I don't know. I don't want to get really personal, but like, what could you eliminate to unlock some of that deployment?
I want to say this one first so that I get it and everybody's going to be envious. Eliminate tariffs. That matters for all of the energy technologies.
I wouldn't eliminate this, but I would change and quicken how we permit and cite clean energy projects. But I'll try to go fast. Greg just said one word, so I'll just say one sentence.
No, I want a little bit more on that, because so is it, why doesn't it work? Like, at what level and why doesn't it work?
Well, so, okay, I can give a longer spiel about that. So in Washington State, we have what's known as the Energy Facility Siting Council, something like that. FSEC is the acronym, and it's a state-level siting and permitting agency, and it has authority to override local county opposition to projects, but we still run into a lot of challenges where local counties put up a lot of opposition to these renewable developments. We actually had a few counties in Washington State enact moratoriums on solar and wind development in eastern Washington. I was just looking before this talk at FSEC's website, which you can all do. You can see the projects that they're reviewing, and basically they issue the site certificate, which allows a developer to build in Washington. There are maybe 10 projects on there right now, and people can submit public comments. Almost every single public comment is opposed to these renewable projects. I even wrote some of them down. Maybe I'm deviating from the the new approach. But I just think it's really telling. I had never even done that myself. Look at the comments, but somebody says, take your solar farm to California where it's sunny, where there's lots and lots of houses. Take your solar farm to Nevada where most of it is just dry desert, perfect for your stupid computer panels. Another more measured one is, our organization supports a rapid transition from fossil fuels to clean energy alternatives. We are, however, strongly opposed to this proposed solar project. Almost every single comment is like that, and so we need to, this is getting a little into solutions, but we need to activate people to support specific projects, and any of us can go onto those websites, that website right now, and submit comments supporting clean energy projects. Sorry, I went a little off the script, but I got...
No, that's news to me. That's interesting. All right, Greg.
Yeah, it's hard to pick one. That was a good one. I'd probably go with speeding up the rate at which government can move things along, whether that's permitting and those type of things, or in the case of a state like Washington, where we have an enormous amount of money that we're investing in solutions, moving that money out more quickly. So I would say taking the role of government, which is so critical to this, and making it even more effective and more quick, I think would make a big difference.
Okay. I'm going to do a last one, and then we can go to Q&A. Last speed round question is what's something people in the crowd here can do to help, and Emily kind of did this, you have to do a new one, but to kind of help support and facilitate some of this, and I don't, whether it's policy, investing, whatever you want to say.
Maybe I'll go first
Yeah.
this time. I'll do two. One very personal and one is more collective. Political. there's certain moments where, as consumers, you have the ability to make a meaningful difference, right? It's when you, and everyone's in a different life position, but like when you buy a new car, when you're, you're talking about a renter, there are limitations to some of this, but when your gas furnace goes out or your gas water heater goes out, when those purchasing opportunities happen, right? They might happen once every 10 years, once every 20 years, depending on whether it's a car or an appliance. Make the switch then, like that's really, really important. And, if your water heater goes out and it's winter, you're not gonna wanna be messing around looking for like all the different options. You're gonna be like, I need the new water heater for my next shower, like in 5 hours. So, be prepared, understand what the alternatives are, so when that moment comes, like a car, you typically have more time, but sometimes those other ones, it's like you need to decide then. So again, everyone's in different personal situations, so you don't always have this, but when you do have opportunity to make that choice, make that. That's insufficient though, because there's also these sort of larger political things, and so, there's a million things you could do, but maybe the most important thing is to just join an organization that's heavily engaged in this type of work, so when the moment comes where you can raise your voice, you're connected to that organization, you trust that organization to sort of be able to provide you good guidance about the best ways to communicate it, about when to do it, and like raise your voice together, because individual voices they're just going to get drowned out, but collective voices organized together can make a difference. So those would be the two things I would say.
Great.
Kind of stole one of mine, Greg, but I'll just build on it, which is this idea of the home retrofits that we can do, if you can do that. The tax credits, so people I'm sure are aware that Trump gutted the IRA, but we still have until the end of the year to access tax credits for a heat pump, for rooftop solar, we have until the end of this month to access the EV tax credits. So if you are in a position to take advantage of those, the clock is ticking. In terms of the collective action, I would also add, I don't know if anyone has read Bill McKibben's new book, but he's going out there and really trying to get people engaged around a day of collective action on September 21st called Sunday. And there are a lot of local events happening in Seattle and the broader Seattle area, so that could be a great way to get engaged. It's really all about celebrating the power of the sun.
So I would also say, kind of on the theme of when you're buying or you're looking to be prepared in advance, if you're getting a roof replaced, think about going and looking at Project Sunroof and seeing how effective would your roof be for putting solar on it. And so that, it's a Google product, I think, where they've looked at all the roof, they looked at the shading on your roof, and they can give you an estimate of sort of what kind of solar production you would get off of your roof. And that's a great time to put solar on your house, is if you've got a new roof and you're putting the project together. The other thing I would say is that along my theme of solar and storage, battery storage, is that the new generations of cars, every GM car, I think, starting with this electric GM car, starting with this model year, is going to be on a platform that lets you charge and discharge your car battery. And a car battery is a big storage resource. We're starting to get some incentive programs around here where the utility will say, oh, we'll give you some breaks if you charge your car this way and you let us do some discharging. But you don't need a natural gas generator if you have a car that's plugged in and can go back and forth. You don't need a gas generator. And so vehicle energy storage, it's not like a thing that you just fill up and it all gets spit out your tailpipe. Now it's sitting there waiting, available to use for a variety of things. And that is also storage that collectively can help make the grid work a lot better with market incentives that are slowly coming. We're kind of slow in that regard in this state in getting markets that incentivize some of these activities. But those are two kind of purchases you can be putting into your head as you're thinking about the next time.
All right, I think we'll go to audience questions. That sounds all right.
Yes. Introduce yourself before you ask your question.
My name is Iskra, and I'm really glad you did this because I want to riff for a minute on the comments section. You cannot sell this energy if you don't read the comments section. You have to respect the comments section. The comments section is how Donald Trump got elected. What I mean by that is that when you read the comments section, you hear the narratives, two competing narratives that are running our country right now. One is class resentment, and the other is romance. Here we've got Donald Trump selling us the idea of the lower class while he's rich. But he wants the ocean to be free. He doesn't want it to be ruined by these ugly windmills. There's the romance of the West, which wants golden amber waves of grain. It does not want a West which is a factory, run by technocratic elites surveilling the energy usage of each person individually. And I think all this technical stuff is fascinating. I think you need a third micro battery, which is the battery that really tries to connect with the culture in which this new technology will live. The fire that we all used to gather around created the culture of storytelling. Okay, now we're looking at a total shift of culture where I don't just get to turn on my gas. You're asking me to collaborate, share to the grid, maybe be surveilled by the state. You're radically changing the culture. I want to address also that if you start looking at what the comments section says, you may have to change the technology because you have to take the realities of class into your thinking. Let's just take one initiative very specifically, the idea that we should banish all requirements for parking in Seattle. That will really hurt the working class. It's the low-income person, which I was. I drove an 88 Toyota Corolla for 38 years. You have 3 jobs. You work the night shift. You come home at 4 o'clock in the morning. You do not do that on a bus. And you don't have the luxury of laptoping or taking the bus for 4 hours in a day, which I sometimes did. So it's a comment, but I would love to know if you have can I work on that new department? The new battery that communicates this stuff.
Thank you for your comment. I really appreciate the point about the culture because I do think that is really reflective in the discourse, of course, around renewable energy. And you're right. If you read all of those comments, you see how it really is deeply ingrained, this anti-solar, anti-wind perspective. And it's reflective of the huge political divide that we have even just here in Washington between Western Washington and Eastern Washington, and the urban parts of the state and the rural parts of the state where, because of the geography, is where we need to site the renewable resources. It's much sunnier east of the Cascades and windier, and even farther afield, we'll need to build transmission lines to connect resources in Montana, wind in Montana, to power Seattle. And so I think it's a real challenge. I don't have an idea really, but just agreeing that that is a real challenge.
Anyone else? No? Okay. Other questions?
I'll head to the back first and then circle back over here to you. We're doing a quick time check. We got about 20 minutes. We purposely left a lot of time for questions tonight, but we do want to try and keep those trim, although I appreciate amber waves of grain a lot personally. Where was the hand? I apologize, I lost you. There you are.
Hi, I'm Seisha Kearns. Thanks so much to all of you for sharing your thoughts and expertise tonight. Really appreciate it. I've been curious lately about the regional actions that are being taken given the Trump administration. So the new health alliance that has been formed with Oregon, Washington, California, and now Hawaii. And of course, like you were just saying, Emily, there's energy doesn't stop at the state borders, right? It's all interconnected. So I'm just curious, what do you all think might be some of the most interesting new opportunities that if there weren't any barriers, we should be seizing for regional action? Like what kind of other alliances might happen across different states that could kind of make up for what's being removed from the Trump administration, might get around it, might be new ways of thinking about how we work interstate and at a regional basis to try to advance this stuff in light of where we're at. I'm curious to hear what you think.
Is that Greg, maybe, to start?
Yeah, I'll go. I mean, California, Washington, Oregon is the fourth largest economy on the planet. Well, let's admit California is a large percentage of that, but regardless, the West Coast is a gigantic economic mover, and we've seen like lots of examples of this. I have long been a believer that like federal policy on climate and clean energy is not the most important thing. Because on any federal policy, the last vote's going to be like Joe Manchin. If we're lucky, we get to the chance where the last vote is. Right now, we're like not even close to having Joe Manchin be the vote that gets us to something. So the chances of getting a really powerful federal policy, anytime in any reasonable time frame that anyone could come up with, is extraordinarily low. We were lucky enough in the very brief window with Biden that we were able to get a budget piece pass, which was a huge victory, but sort of a policy. So my belief has always been the way that we can actually make change is through state policy and then regional coordination, right? So if you look right now, we have like, I don't know, Sasha, you worked on a lot of this stuff, like 24, 25 states have 100% clean electricity policies, right? That's a market mover, right? And those are like, I don't know what the percentage, that's probably 60% of the population is in states that are 100% clean. That completely changes the market and sends a really clear signal that like solar and wind, good to go, batteries, good to go, right? That's a huge market seller. And then also, it's not just blue states that can do it, and I'll ultimately answer your question specifically, but I wanted to step back. I think you were talking about Texas, I think. Texas is doing amazing things on clean energy right now, right? They're number one in solar. They're number one on, they're number one on solar. They're number two on wind. Texas is doing amazing things. I think a lot of people might be familiar with the Inflation Reduction Act, the Biden policy. Something like 70% of that money went to red states. So you're seeing Georgia, South Carolina building EV manufacturing. So they don't have to pass policies to basically be at the forefront of some of the changes that are going on. So I'm a huge believer that like state and regional action is not just like, oh, well, we can't get it done at the federal level, so I guess all we can do is at the state level. Like, no, you change markets by having that scale of change happening. So like that excites me, again, not just because like, we're screwed at the federal level. So then getting specifically into the West Coast and what are the opportunities there? I think some of it are things that are already happening, like electric vehicle highway, where you're, all the way across I-5, you're coordinating from California to Washington on where you're going to put those charging stations. So if somebody wants to make that, or cap and invest policies, which Washington and California has. California right now is in the fight for its life to reauthorize their policy, and they're fighting in part to make sure that it can link so that Washington, California, as well as Quebec, which all have these policies, can link together, and that can transform markets and send clear market signals, right? So like, to me, the key is, you cover a lot of this stuff. It's like, you gotta send the right market signals. And if you have enough states and enough regions doing it, it's enough to offset the fact that, maybe the federal government's not giving the signals that for folks who want to see what we're doing happen. So that's how I think about it.
I would just add that there's really an interesting thing we already have that is at risk, and that is the whole Columbia River Basin area. If you have followed any of the policies around that, that's Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, Canada, Washington, the Snake and Columbia River, which is the core of our energy system. And so we have had decades of cooperation there, and it's at risk right now because of federal policy, because it involves international relations. And so how we share our water across the border is at risk. But we do have a lot of that core capability to really coordinate in mutual best interest among our region. And so it's a deep it's actually a deep skill, I think.
All right, go to another question.
Thank you. I'm Nick Bond, and I'd like to hear your thoughts about land use and zoning and those kind of issues. My anticipation is that some of the efficiencies we've gained is due to that. And as we grow in population, is there appetite to have some, zoning to keep people from developing out in the hinterlands of Snohomish County and so forth, and just the efficiency of high-density housing, better transportation, more efficient transportation, and so forth. So is there an appetite for that, and what's happening on that realm? Because there's not just benefits from an energy point of view, but from an environmental point of view, more streams that aren't messed up for the salmon and so forth. So I'd just like to hear your thoughts.
Like you,
Emily?
Yeah, that's a big part of Sightline's work. So Sightline, I lead the climate program, but we also have a big housing team. And the whole reason we have a housing program is to advocate for the types of things that you're describing because of the environmental impact and benefit of having denser, walkable, convenient cities rather than sprawl. And people's carbon footprint is so much lower when they live in a walkable city. It's sort of obvious. But there's also the wildfire connection because we are increasingly growing into and building in high-risk areas, which then catch on fire, and then the entire state is paying for the potential damage through wildfire suppression costs. So there's also this cross-subsidy happening. So you should reach out to my colleagues who know a lot more about the urban planning situation in Seattle. I know Seattle's updating its comprehensive plan right now, and follow along with Sightline's work because we have an entire team devoted to this.
Do you have a sense of where public sentiment is these days? Is it trending towards, okay, I see the importance of density and I'm okay with it even though it's a little bit uncomfortable?
Seems to be. I don't know if it's just where I'm sitting, but it seems like there's a lot more support for the so-called YIMBY movement. There's been a lot of successful policies enacted, including here in Washington State, to make it easier to build denser housing here, and also in California. There's been a big push, and I think there's a movement to take some of those lessons and successes from the housing effort, YIMBY effort, and bring them to the clean energy effort to make it easier to build clean energy too.
Another question. I know someone in the very back had his hand up.
From a holistic point of view on how we're approaching energy for the benefit of all, not just some.
That's an easy one. Who's taking that?
Is really the question, should we replace the Snake River dams? Is that really the question?
The answer is yes.
I will simply say, I think the challenge with that particular issue is that until there's clarity about exactly how we're going to generate the energy to replace that, they're just not going to come down politically, right? Whether you think it's a good idea or not from a pure political perspective, I just don't see that ever happening until there's confidence from enough stakeholders that that energy is going to get replaced. We're good to take them down now. And even then, there's politics are really difficult, but I just think until that particular problem gets solved, which is, we've talked a lot about how difficult it is to create new resources. So it's an incredibly complicated situation, but because that is the status quo, the dams exist, a lot has to change politically and a lot needs to be done to replace the energy before I think, and I don't work on this issue, so I'm not an expert in any way, but I am expert enough in politics to know that until that energy, there's confidence from enough people that I think it's unlikely they will come down whether it's a good idea or not. That's my sense.
I need my sexy fusion to come online, and then it's gonna solve everything.
Well, no, but actually, I think I would just want to say to that is, that's so interesting that sometimes it's surprising. I was talking with with a tribal member who's a Democratic member of the state legislature, and he's the co-chair of the nuclear caucus in Washington State, along with a Republican from Eastern Washington, a guy named Chris Stearns, and I was asking him about tribes' views on nuclear. And he said that a number of tribes whose number one priority is what you were talking about, is taking the Snake River dams down, are like, we're pretty open to looking at nuclear because we know that the only way they're coming down is if there's new sources of energy. So it's such a complicated stew that creates things like, oh, you wouldn't necessarily think that tribes are going to support nuclear, and maybe in the absence, in a vacuum, they might not. But the reality is, if you really want those dams to come down, you have to think differently. So it's such a complex thing that brings in lots of different factors. And I was, this was a month or two ago, this conversation, and I found it to be super fascinating to understand the dynamics in that issue.
Another question up here?
I see both those hands. It's 7:53. I think we can do it.
Hi, my name is Elise McMillan. I have a question about batteries specifically, because I've heard batteries, grid capacity, batteries, grid capacity, batteries. How do you grapple with the fact that, number one, many of the materials that go into batteries are sourced many times energy inefficiently from faraway places? You mentioned, Dan, that it's getting more efficient, yet there still are the same constituents in many cases. So how do you grapple with that fact? And also, how do you grapple with the fact that we're going to be entrenched in a lot of batteries at end of life at some point? So recycling, reuse, batteries that can only get to 60-80% state of charge. What do we do with that problem?
But it's a great question. It is one of the grand challenges that is in the research phase right now. I mean, I've been watching, as I've been paying attention to, the worst minerals are going away because as the technology scales, you simply cannot supply with the worst minerals. But there are lots of alternative technologies that are on the cusp or are currently being used. I mean, part of the challenge that we have here is that we like to travel long distances in our car, even though the car mostly sits, 90% of the time it sits, and most of the driving is short distance. And so we put a lot more battery in than we typically need, and the chemistries that are the least disruptive to the planet are not the longest range batteries. And so that is a particular American market thing. And so the technologies are catching up in that regard. The second part of the question, the circularity question, I mean, that actually is part of what my research group works on, is how do we test a battery to understand where it's at today for its safety, for its potential second use? Because right now a battery is this closed off thing, and when it gets to a certain amount of spent, it's like, what do I do with it? But if we have good diagnostics, we can find second uses, and if they're validated, we can sell these batteries and we can create a circular economy. We've worked with King County Metro, all the buses that drive around town that are the hybrid buses, they have batteries on the top, and those batteries go bad. A light goes off on the dashboard that says, bring it in for service. They pull the battery out, they send it to Texas to incinerate it and get an environmental certificate that they, but we've tested some of those, and there are some of those batteries that are now out in the world running off-grid internet service providers and stuff. There is a whole economy waiting to be created out of batteries if we can understand their state of health and then value them. You know, honestly, I think it could be Amazon's biggest business, is creating a marketplace for this because it is a massively increasing asset. And even the battery in a car is, I mean, it's half of the cost of that vehicle basically right now. So it is, it's an unbelievable asset that we're not properly testing and managing and keeping the circularity. A lot of work going on in there, a lot of companies. Microsoft has invested a ton in companies to do recycling. We have a number at the Washington Clean Energy Test Beds of companies that are recycling materials and making new batteries and testing them and whatnot. So there's a lot of churn, and as we're seeing the adoption of batteries, there's going to be uses for those batteries. But you're right, the current state is not adequate right now.
I feel like she was a plant, but that was a great question, great answer.
No, that is what, by the way, that is like one of the questions I always hear. One thing I didn't mention is that if you drive enough with your electric vehicle, I mean, all the life cycle assessments, sort of the cradle to grave assessments of electric vehicles say that they are more environmentally sound than fossil fuels. And you can really think about it easily. You go to the gas station, you fill it up, you've added a couple 100 pounds or something to your car, you drive away, it's all going out the exhaust pipe. Then you fill it up again. That battery is there to be used over and over. So those minerals, that mining that you did, it went into the battery and it's used for years and years and years. The mining you did to pull that oil out of the ground, shipped it across the country. That oil doesn't all just come right from Washington State. It gets shipped all over the globe. That oil is used once and thrown away. And so the life cycle assessment of that says you are not saving the planet by driving an individual car with an electric battery, but you are doing much less damage by driving an electric vehicle.
All right, one more up front. Okay.
One more. It's nearly 8, so we'll do speed question, speed answer. We need it for the video.
Okay, hi everyone, I'm Foy Trung. I have a question that hopefully ties together some points from all of yours. So Dan, going to your point about doing things in a timely manner, because we don't have a lot of time, and also doing things immediately. And then Emily, you were talking about speeding up permitting, and Greg, you were talking about doing things within our state that we have control over. So my question is, one of the things that is a challenge in our state, in our region, is the interconnection queues. So that is the question I wanted to ask you guys. What can us as individuals or the public, as well as organizations such as yours, do to help out with the interconnection queues, the interconnection waiting in our state?
Oh my goodness. For folks who have no idea what an interconnection queue is, which is probably many of you, are you specifically talking about BPA or just in general? Yeah, BPA is, they control a lot of decision making about projects, and the interconnection queue is basically the line that companies or whoever wants to get a project approved have to wait in, and the line is very long. I've been in a lot of meetings on how to break the interconnection queue problem. We have no good ideas for how to solve it, honestly. I have no good answer for you. It's like, it is, you have all of these projects, not just like renewable projects or transmission, but you've got these manufacturing facilities that are gonna wanna manufacture good stuff in Moses Lake, and they can't get energy. This interconnection queue, I talked to my friends at Puget Sound Energy, and they're like, the biggest problem is BPA's interconnection queue. Like, you go on, and the number of people who say, like, our biggest barrier isn't even siting. It's like the BPA interconnection queue, and we sit in meetings and we we bang our heads, and we have, I wish, I like to give answers where I'm like, I really see the pathway, and like, if you do this, and I don't have a good one for that one. I just have to be honest. I want one because it is incredibly important. Your question is like dead on, and I don't know how to do it.
I don't really have a good answer either, but just so people are aware, BPA is Bonneville Power Administration, which owns and operates about 75% of the grid in the Northwest. And so if you want to build a new project, most likely you're going to need to interface with them. I was just at a conference and heard that they are reforming their interconnection queue process. I don't know the details.
We'll get the memo in 5 years.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I'm
a little cynical on this topic, sorry.
Yeah. I would, in terms of organizations directly working on it, I bet Renewable Northwest is working on that. So I would reach out to somebody there.
Sorry, just interconnection queue. What actually is that?
It's basically trying to get your project hooked up to the grid. So if you're if
Right.
you're
So if you have a wind farm or
a solar
facility,
you need
or a new big industrial potential user or whatnot, there's just to plug onto the main grid.
They have to make sure there won't be reliability issues or that the grid can handle it. So they have these long lines. You get in line if you're a project developer to make sure that you can get added to the grid.
And you pay millions for studies and things like that. It's just, it is an unbelievable process, I think.
I on the positive side, like, we're not giving up. You know what I mean? Like, we can't give up because it's too important. If an entity controls 7% of transmission, we've all talked important transmission is, we can't give up on that. I'm just saying it's an incredibly difficult challenge. BPA is a nearly impenetrable political institution that's very difficult to influence and succeed. We're never giving up, but it's hard.
I'm going to pretend the AI is going to fix it. It'll have the answers.
Well, no, actually, there is
AI.
You sound like my students. Oh, I don't know the answer, but maybe AI can tell me.
AI will help, but it won't fundamentally solve it, because the AI can help them figure some stuff out, but it's not going to totally break through that wall.
Fine.
And I knew you were just being funny.
I know. Well, I hope a little it could help.
Yeah.
I mean, to the point of the expense of the studies, maybe, whatever. All right. I work for a tech publication, so I get Pollyannish. And so I think that's the end of everything, right?
Give up hope. We can't do it.
All right. Oh, we could do one last thing that makes you hopeful. Do you want to? Can we do a speed round of that? Okay. Oh, yeah. Oh my goodness. One thing, just one thing that makes you hopeful in the climate space.
The young people that I see and work with every single solitary day makes me want to get up every morning and also makes me hopeful.
Okay.
I think the fact, just building on Greg's earlier point, that we can do so much at the state and local level, and that's actually where a lot of the most important change happens. So I feel very motivated to keep working on that.
I think what gives me hope is that, the economics of the solutions are changing so rapidly in our favor. And when that happens, it makes it so much easier to win on the political side, right? If coal is cheaper than renewables, it's pretty hard to win the political fights around that. If gas is cheaper than renewables, it's really hard to win the political fights around that. If your typical car is way cheaper than an electric vehicle, it's harder to win those political fights. We're not totally across the finish line on all of them, but the economics, even in the last 5 years, have shifted so dramatically. And I don't say this because, my point is that technology is a savior, but we do operate in a political environment where costs matter a lot. And to your point, I'm not sure there you are. For an individual who has to pay for turning on the lights or getting on a bus or buying a used car, economics, don't matter just from a political perspective. They matter from the perspective of, this is my life. And the fact that the trend lines have already kind of crossed, and there's really no reason why we're going to not continue to see solar and wind get cheaper. Batteries, Dan's favorite, to keep getting cheaper. Electric vehicles to keep getting cheaper. That's going to keep moving. There might be a slight little blip here and there because of macroeconomics, but generally speaking, we're moving in the right direction. That makes it so much more accessible to more and more people, which is fantastic, and it makes it so much easier to change policies to make it even more cheap and more accessible. That's really good, and that gives me hope. And the only question is, so we will win, But because climate change is about science, the question is, can we win fast enough? And I'll leave you with that.
All right. That's it. Thanks to City Club and the other sponsors.